That was an amendment adopted as a result of a request from Delegate Krebs. An aggrieved applicant may request a hearing in accordance to the Administrative Procedure Act, and judicial review may be sought. A physician who acts in good faith and with reasonable grounds in providing the statements and opinions required by the restoration process may not be held civilly or criminally liable for those actions. So again, a doctor has to sign off. There is an application that DHMH will provide. Once that application is submitted, it's a decision made within DHMH. Thank you, Madam Vice Chair.
Thank you. And then we move on to, actually, it's the back of, after the entire restoration process, so it's right before page 41. Section 5-143 is a new section that talks about the registration of firearms upon moving to the state of Maryland, and the only change that these two committees have made to that, as the bill came in, it provided that when you moved into Maryland, you would need to register your regulated firearm with the Maryland State Police within 30 days of moving to Maryland. These two committees have changed that to a 90-day period. Then the next section is 5-145, which is a new section in the law, which gives the state police the ability to review dealer records, and the change that these two committees have made to that, again in consultation with the Maryland Dealers Association, is to clarify that in fact the records that the dealers need to keep are really just the ATF records, and it is not that this particular section does not require the dealers to all of a sudden keep two sets of records, but that in fact the state police are to be given access to the records that the dealers do keep. And additionally, because if the dealers don't keep good records, there are penalties for that. But at the same time, we wanted to make it very clear that because a lot of these records, and in fact the dealers were good enough to sort of show us some of their records, they are very painstaking to keep the kind of records that they have to keep for the number of guns and the type of inventory that they keep. We wanted to be sure that everybody understands that sometimes there are inconsequential mistakes or errors, and that's not what we are trying to capture with any of the penalties. So we did add language that makes that very clear. We added in on page 42, we've also added a new provision that talks about reporting lost or stolen firearms. That was a bill that I believe actually we combined two bills that we heard, one from Delegate Clippinger and one from Delegate Ana Sol Gutierrez, and indicated that if you own a gun and it is lost or stolen, you need to report it within 72 hours. The first time that happens, if you don't report it as you should, it is a civil violation. If it happens a second time, then it is a misdemeanor. That's Amendment 6. Page 43 of the reprint again moves back and talks again about someone who has a mental disorder, and again sort of repeats the prohibitions about when you can't own, when you are prohibited from owning a gun if in fact you have a mental disorder. Although I think that is when it applies to a rifle or a shotgun, but it is the same disqualifications. And I think then the final amendment is actually amendment number 10, which is uncodified language. Is an amendment that was proposed by Delegates Braveboy, Carter, Anderson, and I think a couple of others, but uncodified language that requires the state police to report back to the General Assembly by December 31st, December 31st, 2015, regarding information that they are collecting regarding illegal transfers and possession and transport of firearms within the state, including the number and types of firearms that are seized by the Department of State Police and the best information available as to the source of seized firearms, so that we can again continue to just so we can, as a General Assembly, can continue to review that type of information and see what exactly is happening. I believe that that's reviews, or that's an analysis of the amendments that we have in fact made as joint committees, and certainly would be happy to accept questions, but would like to obviously eventually move the adoption of the amendments.
Okay. And on the bill.
There are questions. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I have some questions. Delegate Hoff, go ahead.
Why would you? We have some amendments we'd like to separate from the whole adoption when you're ready. So if I can give you that now, or we'd like to separate. All right. Well, then when we do the adoption, I just want to make sure there's about 4 of them that we want to hold from the adoption to deal with separately.
Taken on these, this was just I guess the and I apologize. They are proposed committee amendments.
So should we separate all of them, please, or take them up as a group? I don't understand. If there's no vote that's taken on each amendment, should we have
It is in whatever manner the committees would like to handle it. We can take them one by one, or we can take the ones that people are comfortable with. Like I said, Delegate Huff has suggested separating. We can.
I would like to either second that motion or make the motion to separate all of them.
Yeah, we just want to separate some of them.
All right.
Separate.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have questions on some of the amendments. First one is on page 4, amendment number 2, where it talks about restricted firearm ammunition. And it basically says that it means a shell, cartridge, page 4, criminal law 4-110. And again, I'm just trying to understand this, but it means a firearm, ammunition means a cartridge, shell, or other device that is intended for use in a firearm and coated with or containing in whole or in part poly, whatever that is. Then the next Roman numeral 2 is coated with a plastic substance and containing a core other than lead or lead alloy, or entirely composed of a metal or metal alloy other than lead. Now, because you have an or in the last of those 3 Roman numerals, I think statutory construction says that all 3 of these are ors. Is that correct? Is my first question. Okay. So therefore, without reading Roman numeral 1 or 2, we're basically saying that restricted firearm ammunition means a cartridge, a shell, or any other device that is intended for use in a firearm and entirely composed of a metal or metal alloy other than lead. Now, if I'm reading that, you're basically saying if it's not made of lead completely, then it is restricted firearm ammunition. Is that what we're doing? I'm sorry, somebody keeps turning my mic off. I know that there are shotgun shells that are not made of lead. I mean, they're plastic and there's a metal alloy, and then there's shot inside of that. Would that therefore be restricted firearm ammunition? And I'm not an expert on this stuff, but I know that there's probably a lot of cartridges that aren't made with lead.
Amendment. There is an amendment that Delegate Huff and I worked on with the NRA dealing with that issue. This piece comes from the House bill that was introduced, the cop killer bullets, that has been rolled into this bill. So there are amendments addressing that issue. The Delegate Huff has.
I mean, does it... Okay, well, my first question, and I'll ask Delegate Huff this, if you know, and I'm sure you know more about ammunition than I do, but is normal ammunition always made of lead, is my question.
No, the answer is no. Sorry, the answer, yeah, it doesn't work. You have to hit the request, then it comes on. The answer is no, and then I'm waiting on, to be honest, I ordered the amendment this morning, and we haven't gotten it yet, so this was one of the ones, number 2, that we were going to ask to hold. But the problem is, actually, it's interesting. So if you're shooting waterfowl, they need these certain type of coated bullets anyways that they use. And then actually, if you're shooting a bunch of lead bullets, like this would require, they're all going in the bay and the water, which is bad environmentally. So this whole 2 problem, the whole way it's defined is a problem, and we have an amendment to fix that. So I would ask either wait till I've ordered the amendment, either wait till the amendment comes, or we just don't deal with 2 and wait till, because we have the Senate bill sitting here.
My next question is with regard to
12, going down to Amendment 4 at line 12. And I'm wondering if this is an attempt where it says this section does not apply to a .22 caliber rifle with a tubular magazine or a law enforcement officer or a person who retired in good standing. I understand that. And ISO 17025, National Institute of Justice, I understand that. And then the last paragraph is a facility that manufactures or provides research and development testing, analysis, or engineering of personal protective equipment or vehicle protection systems. Is it the point of that paragraph, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, to exclude manufacturers of firearms, or is it understood that manufacturers of firearms are included in this paragraph? Because it doesn't say firearms at all. I mean, yeah, right.
Yes, and cars. I have no idea why this doesn't work, no matter what I do. All right. It is for manufacture of bulletproof vests and cars that have bulletproof glass, so they need to be able to use weapons in order to be able to test them.
This is the section that limits the magazine size.
Correct.
So,
But they need to be able to use higher. Correct.
all I'm saying is that how about those places that manufacture weapons with magazines greater than 10? Manufacturers of magazines,
Because I'm assuming if you manufacture an AR-15 in Maryland, you probably also manufacture the magazine that goes with it. And right now it's 20. Are we saying that manufacturers are exempt under this particular paragraph?
That's in a different section.
Okay.
It's in the lead into the subtitle in page 9. And page 9, I think line 8, that's it, line 9, says this subtitle, if you start at the beginning on line 2, and then go to line 9, possession, importation, manufacture, receipt for manufacturer, shipment for manufacturer, storage. So the subtitle doesn't apply. Sure.
16, when you were reading this amendment, you said that the qualified handgun instructor is recognized by the Maryland State Police and Correctional Training Commission, has a qualified handgun instructor license issued by the secretary. And the language here says secretary, but you said, but is it the secretary that issues the license, or is it the superintendent? No, it's not. The superintendent of state police is different from the secretary. Of Public Safety and Corrections is the same person as the superintendent of state police? There's a secretary of state police? Okay, because it doesn't say that. You wish, what?
It does someplace else as part of a definition.
On page 24, where a person is, page 24 line, we're talking about when a person requests a license and the license is denied, within 30 days after receiving a properly completed application, the secretary shall issue to the applicant a handgun qualified license if the applicant is approved, or a written denial of the application that contains a statement of the applicant's appeal rights under this section. So all the applicant will get is a denial. He won't know why he was denied. He'll just get a denial and then something explaining his appeal rights. Wouldn't we want to give them at least a reason why they were denied under like some subsection or some reason why they were denied?
An amendment. I actually have an amendment about that at the appropriate time, doing just that, what the delegate said.
Okay. This one. Up at the top, page line 8, where an application in the manner and format designated by the secretary, you have to give that, and you have to give a non-refundable application fee of application fee to cover the cost of administrating the program of up to $50. Okay, of up to $50. Now, what program are we talking about is covering? What is this? The testing program or the or what? The actual licensing program. In other words, okay, so to cover the cost of the program, that means like the background checks and all that stuff.
The state police handgun license is not what the state police do. It is not the background check or the fingerprinting. Correct. Okay.
Thank you. Madam Chairman, and if I forget, I want to thank you for your extraordinary work. I have a question concerning the nature of the so-called assault weapons ban. I want to make sure. The effective date of the bill is what, October 1st, 2013? And does this mean that every assault weapon that is in the state as of October 1st, 2013 is grandfathered in, meaning it is not illegal to own and possess that assault weapon as long as it's in the state, or as long as it's in the state in effect as of October 1st? I gather that according to the state police, before January 1st, there were approximately 48,000 assault rifles in the state, correct?
Regulated firearms, that is my understanding, yes.
Well, I'm clear, those 48,000 will remain legal to possess and use because they were in the state before that, correct?
And yes.
Up to an amendment that is here. And also, anyone who buys a regulated firearm, we're referring to it as an assault weapon, over the next 8 months, from January until October, if they have that weapon, those will also be grandfathered in.
That's my understanding, yes.
Well, we're purchasing them, let's say, at the rate of $7,000 a month, which is probably conservative. We might actually have, as of October 1st, over 100,000 assault weapons in the state, which will be grandfathered in and which will be legal. Is that correct? And is it also correct that it will be lawful to maintain those firearms, in other words, to repair them in the event that they need any type of repair? And is it also correct that if somebody wants to will the firearm to his or her son or daughter, that actually that will also be legal, so it could be left to another generation? And there is an amendment here, and I'm not going to address it, but I will ask to divide it out. I believe it's my dear friend Delegate Kelly's amendment, which is on page 10, I think, Amendment 5, that seems to say a person who lawfully possessed or placed a verifiable purchase order for an assault long gun or a copycat weapon before October 1st, 2013, that if that person has merely placed the order and then subsequently obtains the gun 3 months, 4 months later, that will also be grandfathered in. Thank you.
Shortly. Okay.
No, I want to follow up on that conversation. Isn't it, Madam Vice Chair, is it not so, for what Delegate Oaks just asked you, that the reason that they're going to remain in that system is because that's the system they're submitted to?
Yes.
See? And they're going to be in that system, period. And Maryland, in effect, will no longer control those fingerprints because they will have been submitted to the national database. No, I'm asking you right now. And we won't have possession of those prints. Thank you.
Following up on that question, so every crime that's committed where we take a fingerprint from a location, we get a murder, we get a rape, we get a homicide, they're going to run that fingerprint against all this new database that we're now putting together here because we no longer have any control of it. They're going to run it against, I don't know the correct, maybe the APHIS or whatever it is. I mean, you see it on TV. But now we have that capability of taking a single fingerprint from a crime scene and we're going to be running it against all these new database of fingerprints that we now have. So, the citizens that are, law-abiding citizens are going to be, be run against, be in the same crime database as every other criminal out there. Am I not correct?
Their database as are the teachers and the nurses and everybody else's.
Well, actually they do. When you have your fingerprints taken, if you're a teacher or a child care provider or for whatever reason that you have your fingerprints taken, you absolutely do pay the $34.50 to have your fingerprints taken. Or if someone from the State Police or Stacy can answer the question. Although there is a provision in the bill, which I can't find at the moment, about the privacy of the fingerprints. So, all right. All right, page 23, line 28. Yes. Yes. So,
it's the same question.
Yes.
Fingerprints.
Yes. All right, council has our answer.
If a person applies for a license and has given fingerprints and then they're denied, the fingerprints are retained because there is an appeals process and the prints might be needed for that, but there is a prohibition against the use of the fingerprints or any other information submitted for any purpose other than the licensing and application process.
system. Okay. They can't use it for that, right? No, they can only use it for the licensing piece. So if you do not have a license, they're using it only in order to be able to determine whether or not you can own a gun. Except that we, in the bill, and the way that this is designed, is so that it is only to determine whether or not you are the ability to own a gun. So if you don't have the ability to own a gun, then that's the only thing they're going to use it for, or are able to use it for. Yes?
Wait,
Time.
We'll be recognized, wait.
Okay.
Yes, I know, go ahead, yes.
Thank you. But it kind of contradicts each other, because you're giving it to the director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, but yet you're telling the federal government that they can't use it for any other reason. You can't have it both ways. I mean, they're not going to listen to the state of Maryland when they're running fingerprints through. I mean, we can control the state police database by saying you can only use it for this purpose, but by adding the FBI in there, I don't know how we control the FBI with using those fingerprints.
Okay, I've been asked to announce that if you're going to speak, you have to push your button. We're going to go into the system where if you're going to speak, all you need to push your button. If you have a microphone. If you don't have a microphone, just speak loud.
We're going to have somebody research the answer for you. I don't have it this minute, but we will get it before we vote, okay? I understand. Right. Right. I understand. And we will, okay, and that's fair. We will have an answer before we vote. Okay. No, that's all right. I heard, okay. We will have an answer before we vote.
Delegate McCollum.
On not the issue of the money that Delegate Oaks brought up, but the issue of the fact that, let's say they decline, that you're not allowed to have a license. Are we going to require that there's an explanation so that then the person knows whether or not they should appeal the Secretary's decision? And in other words, I don't think it's real clear the appeal rights that are spelled out. I think they should be for folks so that they know that if they're denied by the Secretary, then does it go to an administrative hearing? And then at that point, if you're denied again, do you have a right then to go to the circuit court? It's not spelled out. I mean, this is a Second Amendment right, a constitutional right, and I think we need to be very specific. If you're denied the right to get a license for a gun, what are your remedies?
It's in for denial, but not the latter part of what you just discussed.
Then to be able to, I mean, somebody needs to put in an amendment that allows you then to go up the food chain to the court system then.
Line 25, it reads that a licensed firearms dealer may continue to possess, sell, transfer on or before October 1. Does this mean that if I own a gun shop and I have an inventory of guns that will be banned by this, I'll still be able to sell them to Maryland citizens legally, or only to some folks in Idaho or Texas?
The dealers were concerned, as were some of us that spoke with them, that somehow they had inventory on October 1st. It would be illegal for them to continue to have that. So we wanted to be sure to protect them. But under other provisions of the bill, this allows them to then be able to sell it out of state.
Does the bill anywhere speak to an individual who lawfully owns a gun of this type that's been banned for sale in Maryland? Is an individual able to sell it out of state?
Okay, now let's get to the name.
Wait, Delegate Kelly.
Oh, Delegate Scully, go ahead.
On page 10, line 29, just want to clarify something, and thank you for placing it in the bill, about a person who lawfully possessed or placed a verifiable purchase order for an assault long gun. Is verifiable known? I mean, is someone going to come along and say, well, you didn't put down full price, or you were supposed to put down a third, or an order? I mean, do I assume that is just a matter of whatever the dealer accepts as being verifiable? Someone has asked me, does this mean you have to put down a partial payment or a percentage of it or what have you?
I think a verifiable order is an order written out that says, you know, that you agree to purchase the item at a certain price, signed by both of the parties. Any type of order would suffice.
And the last question I have, or the second question, is, and I discussed this with the Vice Chairman, is that in an area such as mine, where I'm situated directly beside West Virginia and Pennsylvania, and I have a sportsman's club, and they have frequent long gun competitions and such, after this law becomes effective, if it would pass, would people living in Pennsylvania, whether in Bedford County, Mineral County in my case, would they be able to transport their assault rifles lawfully owned in Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and sister states into Maryland for competition and repair?
They're lawfully purchased. I don't see any problem at all with it.
We can put language in there just to confirm that there, right?
I think that goes without saying.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, we want to split out amendments 5, 6, 7, 2, and 10, and no one else here has objection to the rest I know, unless somebody wants to speak out. All right, well, it's amendment, just the whole amendments. We want to pull, so from adopting, pull amendment number 5, amendment number 6, amendment number 7, amendment 2, and then amendment 10, and then just ask that you adopt the rest of the amendments, and then we'll go through with our points on those other ones.
Madam Vice Chairman, I just want to make sure that I'm moving to divide out amendment number 5, which is on page 10, that I don't know if that's being covered by Delegate Huff, but okay, thank you.
Verifiable purchase order is in number 5. And let me see if I can find number 6. Hang on one second. Yeah, I know. Okay. There's been a motion to accept the other committee amendments.
Second motion.
And actually one, in fairness, yes. I'm sorry. I was just going to talk about number 1. I was just going to say that about what I know. Number 1, I think we will have to just accept as Number 1 is just the purpose paragraph and the sections. And clearly those would be technical amendments, and I think council would be able to handle changing those. So we don't have to adopt whatever. Right? Okay. There's a question behind me.
Thank you for asking Delegate Huff a question. You created the amendment, you've given the numerical order for a reason that you put 2 after the other 3 amendments.
No, I can give it a numerical order. So the motion, and I'll make the motion now, that we would accept all the other amendments except for 2, 5, 6, 7, and 10, because there's discussion on those. So I'll make the motion that we accept all the other amendments to the committee except for 2, 5, 6, 7, and 10, which we have questions on. So that's what I would offer up.
favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Does anyone have to vote against that? So it gets unanimous. Okay?
Amendment 5? Okay, I'll wait then, thank you.
It's been placed in the bill, and is it your intention to take it out?
Here, and I apologize, I gave Claire the language that I have. Amendments is still not giving me the amendment, but I have the language that I want in there, and I've showed it to Delegate Kiefer, who has the bill in on the House side, and he's fine with the amendments. Basically, it's a completely technical, it's just a better definition. I can read it off to you if you'd like.
All I got is one copy right here. Whatever the NRA. I need that copy. I'm just afraid they're going to ask me to read it.
I just wonder what Amendment 5 is. It's long. Okay. A lot of items. I can get one. Actually, I do have one.
Whatever they came out yesterday on the... This is whatever they came you can see it's just not even going. There's some on the other side, and they're all large. It covers a bunch of it. I really don't know. Like I said, this is what we're showing. It goes through the whole thing. But that's what was on Merrill's computer as of last night. But it is, like I said, Amendment 5 is really long. Goes through a bunch of it. I talked to one of the delegates who was there pushing in.
All right, great.
Supposedly we are going to get amendments.
Copy of the amendment, go ahead and explain it.
Thank you. Listen, this amendment, which in our discussions on policy and moving forward, logistically, I thought that we had all agreed in several different meetings that I've attended that the idea of requiring these folks that are going to have to take this training component to go to the range and have a firearms proficiency component on the range as part of their test to determine whether or not they could demonstrate proficiency with a firearm, that was something that we logistically could not perform in this state. We do not have a sufficient number of public or private ranges to do that, and the state police does not have ranges across this state. In fact, we have law enforcement agencies that share ranges in different counties. It's just not, logistically, it would be a nightmare to include as part of the training component an ability to show on a range firearms proficiency. So this amendment, it begins on page 22. It would simply strike out the firearms qualification component that demonstrates the person's proficiency and use of the firearm, period. That way nobody would have to go and demonstrate on a range that they knew how to use the firearm, because we know as a state it is logistically a nightmare, and I'm afraid that it could wind up being a de facto gun ban if you can't comply with these types of provisions. And I would ask the committee, in lieu of that, and in lieu of the fact that we don't have the money to put together ranges and have handgun instructors and require all of this, that you would waive that from this document and strike that in total.
I would have to reject the amendment, and here's why. Some of us actually, and as part of working on this bill, actually, is there something actually set up to do this? Maybe not. But I can't believe that there won't be things that are available to do this. And in fact, several of us on the gun safety work group went to a gun store and took a 2-hour classroom instruction and spent an hour on a range for a handgun. I have never used a gun before in my life. Whether or not I ever do again is a different story. But at the same time, at least at a gun shop, and now granted, if I was going to purchase a gun at that particular store, it would have been a free course, because I wasn't going to purchase. The course was $50 plus the cost of the ammunition. That is available to anyone. And I am sure there may be other gun shops that have similar kinds of programs available. If someone wants to purchase a gun, I can't really, as someone who's never used a gun before, the thought that I could purchase a gun without actually handling a gun is unbelievable to me. And I think that this is a very legitimate piece of what our bill includes, and I would ask you respectfully to reject the amendment. I don't think it's an onerous provision, and I think we ought to include it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I would just ask, is there any evidence, any anecdotal evidence of a single person in Maryland who, under the current system, it hasn't been sufficient that when they got their training, either over the video or they went out to a friend and learned how to use a firearm, has went out and caused any kind of a problem from not being trained? None of us want to have somebody who's not trained purchasing a firearm. But this is an onerous burden that's not going to be able to be met by people in the urban areas where there's not going to be the access available. And there is no parade of horrors. There's not one single incident where you come in and say, you know what, this person didn't know how to use the firearm, they went and bought it, and on the way to the car shot themselves in the foot. It doesn't happen. It's not there. Why are we spending time creating this onerous burden other than to keep people from being able to exercise that Second Amendment right? Let's spend our time in putting the bad guys in jail and keeping them there to use the firearms and making sure mental health is available to people. That will do something real. This does nothing except burden those who want to exercise their Second Amendment rights.
That is not going to be tolerated. Go ahead, Danny.
I want to follow up. I appreciate what the vice chair had to say. However, she is being woefully ignorant about the current state of logistically providing this type of access to our range facilities in Maryland. And if you cannot fulfill this component, and you're asking the state now to say whether somebody is proficient in the use of a firearm. Well, the only standard that the state has to do that is the law enforcement standard. And that means you have to qualify on a target and score at least a 70% or better on a police silhouette target to determine proficiency. And I'm telling you, if you go this route and you put this burden on your people in counties in southern Maryland, on the eastern shore, in western Maryland, in Baltimore City, where these range facilities do not exist, it will be impossible to fulfill this. And the governor has not laid the groundwork. We do not have regional ranges. The state police do not even qualify on the Eastern Shore. They drive over to Pikesville and to Sykesville to do this. We do not have these facilities available. If you adopt this, you're either adopting an amendment that's going to require millions of dollars in infrastructure improvements to provide this kind of service, or you're saying that we're not going to be able to do it because logistically it is not possible today. It's not going to be possible at October 1st, and that means people are not going to be able to get a handgun qualification license, and that means they're not going to be able to purchase a regulated firearm, and that, Madam Vice Chair, is wrong.
I just wanted to ask a question and make the amendment and just make a quick statement.
Go ahead, speak up.
The Vice Chair used an example of visiting a gun shop and using a tarp, shooting in that gun shop. Would that setup meet the requirements that you're trying to amend now? I don't believe it would.
The burden is on the state of Maryland to provide a person the opportunity to show that they are proficient in the use of a firearm. There requires a demonstration, and now whether the Secretary of State Police could allow a private sector to provide this type of service remains to be seen. But we're going to have different instructors all across this state. It's going to be a costly program. And I go back to what my good friend, the delegate from Cecil County, said to you earlier. We have a 30-minute, basically, program now that's been in place for years. Where's the problem? Where is the problem that denotes that this is what we should do? Most people go and use a firearm when they want to get their own training, and that has not been a problem in Maryland, but this is going to represent a big problem moving us forward.
My statement is simply being is I actually toured the Sykesville facility about a year and a half ago, and the gentleman was maybe before. None of this was a theme in the governor and I at that time, so he had a reason to say this to me. Jimmy said, we have a part-time schedule, we have to schedule weeks and weeks and weeks out because police officers come from cameras all around.
They're bringing chairs.
We have to wait for the opening ranges for exercise. And I just want to say, the idea is, okay, if we pass this, there will be all these gun, these areas, these shooting ranges springing up to meet the need. I don't think, respectfully, that Vice Chair or anyone else in the committee, maybe you must have an idea how hard it would be to get approval for a gun range or a gun range in the same government county or even in my county. It's very difficult. I mean, they're not doing this like they did. So I really think this is a good amendment. We don't want to restrict people sitting in their rights and put an onerous burden on them. It would be impossible. I think right now with the bill, it would be impossible for most people to get out.
I appreciate what you just said. That requires almost a year or two to even permit putting up a chicken house. Can you imagine what it's going to require to put up a range and all of the environmental folks that are going to come unglued as we try and locate these facilities? Don't do it because you're going to be like New York. You're going to be back in here within 6 months saying, oh my God, we got to strike this out of the amendment. We can't do it.
Business and operations, and firearm qualification component that demonstrates your proficiency on the gun. So it's encompasses all of those different things. I imagine you could at least show that you could handle the gun by picking it up and putting bullets in it, but I don't know that that shows proficiency of being able to actually use it. Proficiency would have to be...
All right, on the motion. Motion.
I think, number one, all you gotta do is look at the uniform crime report. The uniform crime report, the small number of accidental shooting ranges.
606 across the nation.
We don't have a problem as we are now. The second point is, we just had a brand new gun range go up in our district, or just outside of our district, it's actually in the 7th district. Right now, the wait list to get in there is just unbelievable. And we throw this into it, and sure, they're going to get business, but we're talking about 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks before somebody can get into that range and show some kind of proficiency. I mean, we have a requirement that they have to do it by a certain period of time. And we're never going to make it. It's not going to happen. So, I think this is a good amendment. I think we ought to support it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a two-pronged thing we're looking at, mental health and safety. And in this looking at safety, if we can't keep the promise that we made that when we took the people out of the long-term mental health facilities and dropped them in the community, that we were going to provide community services for them, what makes you think that we're going to be able to provide ranges and places to go out and get these services so that you can now qualify? This is a right. It's a constitutional right. We do not require you to have to know what you're talking about to have a First Amendment right. We don't require you to have to know about your religion to practice your religion. And there is no reason, without some overwhelming state interest in showing that there's a problem, that you should require that we now go out and prove that we are proficient in being able to exercise this constitutional right. It's no different. And the example I gave about the state being able to take care of those who they dumped in the community with mental health problems and said, we're going to take care of you, we're going to give you community services, and they're not there today, and that's why we have a problem with people with mental health problems getting a hold of firearms, because we haven't provided that, and I have an amendment for that later, shows me that I can't trust when the good vice chair says, go ahead and let us pass this burden on to those who are exercising their First Amendment right, and in the future, we'll get around to giving you the ability to meet that burden. That is not fair. It's a right. This is unconstitutional burden. It's an infringement, and you cannot do this to law-abiding citizens who have, there's no indication whatsoever. I asked for one single example of a person who's gone out and got a firearm under the current system and created a problem. And without anybody coming before this committee and saying there's a problem, why would we hinder every law-abiding citizen in this state who wants to own a firearm?
I just want to say real quick, I want to talk about the current burden and what we're adding to it, because I actually went out 3 weeks ago and purchased a pistol. I did my test. It took about a half hour. I did the whole thing. And I just want to show, as a state delegate, I'm still waiting. It's been 3 weeks, and I haven't heard back from the Maryland State Police at all. It probably takes 60 days. So under the current law now, I know we think we have a 7-day waiting period. We don't. We have at least a 60-day waiting period. So when you're adding more and more burdens on top of it, you're basically making it impossible in this state to buy a handgun. And I'm proof. I've been waiting 3 weeks to get a gun, and I probably won't have one until session's over. So if you have somebody that desperately needs one, let's say they're in a situation where domestic abuse, they're fearing for their lives, good luck. In 60 days, you may get your gun, and now you got to wait 60 days, and you got to find a range somewhere, and you have to come up with a standard where God knows what we're actually asking, because we don't specify. They could say you got to be a sharpshooter for all we know. So this amendment, it's a good amendment from Delegate McDermott, and I would say because it's so burdensome already to get a gun in this state that we should accept it.
Did the stupid break the camera? Can't stop the students.
Oh, well. That's all, folks.
That happened in my county.
Are you from? I heard about that.
Cecil County.
Yeah. That girl died, right?
Can't stop the students.
You know, so often we have the unintended consequences of what we do, and I guess what I'm a little concerned about is if this amendment does not pass, I know that a lot of the folks that are in law enforcement in some of the other counties have to go to some of, like Prince George's County, the folks on the Eastern Shore. In other words, they don't have any training facilities within their community to train their police cadets. So my thought is if we start flooding whatever gun ranges there are now with folks trying to get comply with this law we're going to apply, the unintended consequences, we may not be able to train the upcoming new law enforcement recruits. So that's an unintended consequence that we already have a problem with without imposing this law.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just would like to say that this is a really good amendment for especially low-income people, poor people. I live in Hartford County, and I have to drive into Cecil County to shoot my gun, and I have to go through the tolls. The toll rates are going up, and our gas prices are going to go up because we just raised the gas tax. So what I'm saying is this is a good amendment for low-income people who may not want to drive all the way down somewhere to use a range. They may not have the gas money. You know, they may not have time. They may have to stay with their children. And I don't think that we should force citizens in Maryland to have to take a proficiency test. This is a really good amendment, and I think it looks out for low-income, poor people. And I would just encourage everybody to vote for this amendment, please. Thank you.
We're going to put some chairs here for you, okay?
Thanks, we offered them seats, but they didn't want them.
Sure.
You're friends? Yeah. You can't see me. You're not ready.
Yeah, we're free.
How you doing?
You should tell people to keep coming, because we got plenty of links.
Yeah, I just posted a picture of over there with the seats.
Cameras we got batteries?
Yeah.
Did you get a good picture of all these people?
Yeah.
Good bet.
And recording it too.
We have an amendment. The amendment before us.
Are you doing audio?
The amendment before us
Right now?
is
You didn't
to
tell me.
eliminate the
I got a
testing
question about that
altogether.
picture.
Yeah.
What's that?
It's not telling me, it's just
Fake
eliminating
smoke?
the proficiency.
The
Why would it be
proficiency
going on the
test
side?
altogether. All right, those in favor of the amendment, raise your hand. Yeah, go ahead.
I like this one better myself, actually.
Apply only for those who are purchasing new firearms not registered yet. What were the estimates as to how many people this would apply to prospectively? I know there's been a significant amount of gun purchases in the last couple of months, but I wonder if anyone had any estimates.
After October 1. So it would only be handguns, but you couldn't, that would be the only thing that you could apply for. How many people applying for handguns? I don't know. They're probably buying them all up right now as we go. Probably, after October 1, there'll probably be a slowdown in business, I would think, but I'm not sure. All right, on the amendment. All right, those in favor, raise their hand. All right, now, who's going to do the count? I'll start here. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Those opposed, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. The motion failed. Let's go on to another motion, please.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like a roll call vote, please.
All right, let's go on to the next one. Are you ready on number 2? Number 2. You get the next one. Number 2. Delegate Huff, are you ready with number 2?
I'd like a roll call vote.
That's
it. Not being broadcast live, and I'm being asked by people what's happening. They would like to come back.
All right, roll call. Give them a roll call.
Yes.
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 Yes. No. No. Yes. Yes.
Pendergrass.
No.
Rockwell.
Yes.
Costa.
Yes.
Collison.
No.
Donahue.
Yes.
Elliott.
Yes.
Frank.
Yes.
Hubbard. Ketch.
Yes.
Kelly. Kipke.
Yes.
Krebs. McDonough. Moorheim.
No.
Murphy.
No.
Nathan Blue.
No.
Oates. Stephen Melvin. Reed. Yes. Resnick. No. Durant.
No.
Turner.
No.
Count.
Unfair. Yes, sir.
We have two tellings. I want to make sure that we differentiate. I'm sure my counterpart. So when the vote goes out, it's got to say, hey, Kelly, hey, Kelly. Why don't we put the full spelling of both names out, okay?
That's 5 minutes wasted, Chairman.
Wait a minute. Let's take up. We're still on Delegate Huff's amendments to. Wait a minute. Oh, are you ready to go on 2? I'm sorry. You want to do your 5? You said.
No, I'm on the same area of the bill we were in.
Okay. Is that okay with you, Delegate Huff?
Yeah, if you want to finish 5 and if you want to come back to 2.
Okay. Whatever. Okay. Because he may cover what you're going to cover anyhow. All right. Go ahead, Delegate.
This amendment is 693422/1.
McDermott.
It is 693422/1. Sure. 693422/1.
on the whole bill. Just the way that amendment did.
Would do is it would allow the secretary to have two options available for implementing this course. He would be able to allow it through a video presentation that would be available online or at locations that he approved. And the reason for this is not dissimilar from what we just talked about. There's two problems with the direction that you want to take us as it relates to training. The first is we have an online course available right now. And the reason that that course is effective is because it is consistent. We know that everyone that purchases a weapon that's regulated in this state and takes that course has seen the same material, presented the same way, and has responded to the same questions. Everybody in this room knows that if you have two instructors presenting material, one instructor could present it in a certain way, and another instructor could present it in another way. Material can be lost. Material might be forgotten. One guy might be cutting shortcuts and skipping something that he or she doesn't deem as important or relevant. Another one might go way over the top and put stuff in that doesn't need to be there at all. That's the reason for consistency in providing this training. This amendment allows for the secretary to conduct and place in effect a video presentation just like we have now that would accomplish the majority of this classroom component. And if we will allow that and allow people to take this online, we will also be allowing the folks that are getting in line for these permits to take this in the comfort of their own home to get the education that they need before you're going to require them to go out and show their proficiency on a range. It is a minimizer of the demands that are going to be placed on us through this bill. It is an infrastructure demand that you're going to have if you have to provide on-site classroom components for people to take this class. And I urge you, for those of you, and many people that raised their hands on that last amendment do not own firearms and have never bought one and have no thought of ever getting one. You don't understand the burden that things like this do logistically to provide this kind of service. And because you've never burdened yourself or taken that time, you don't know what this is going to mean to us as a state. I'm asking you to consider giving the secretary this option so that he or she can move us in this direction in the most efficient manner with consistent training that we know if somebody gets that training this month or they get it 5 years from now, that training will be consistent and meet the demands of this bill. I move the amendment.
I actually would ask you not to approve this amendment, and here's why. We do at the moment have a video, and it is a 20-minute video, maybe 30 at best. And I actually did take that as well. And it is a video that you sort of go through, and after each screen you hit next. You read through. It is... there is, I guess, you just kind of read it and hit next as you go through. There's a little bit of audio. One of my other colleagues actually took it while we were sitting in a meeting. So we didn't have to even listen to the audio and could just hit next. My concern would be that, you have a video. Yeah, you can take it in the comfort of your home, and you can also take it in the comfort of your home and just kind of hit next and not really pay any attention to it. I think we need to let the secretary determine what the best process would be. I don't think this needs to be in the bill, and would respectfully ask that you not accept this amendment. If the secretary needs further, there's a provision in here where the secretary can adopt regulations and we need to let the Secretary determine the best way to do this. I don't think we need this amendment.
Mr. Chairman, I would respectfully suggest that when one goes to look at the video and they have an intent to buy a firearm, they may look at it with a little more attention and a little more detail than, as the Vice Chairman has said, she had no intention of buying a firearm, but she paid the $50 to take the course knowing that she wasn't going to purchase one. So you may do other things and you may not pay attention to the video, but if you're actually going to go out and purchase the firearm, I would think, as the history of Maryland shows, most citizens pay attention, learn what they're doing, and most of them don't just rely on the video. They go out and find a friend, they go to the range, they've learned how to use the firearm before they ever go out and purchase it. And so there is no indication, again, no indication of a single incident or problem in Maryland with the current system, yet we're going to burden thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of persons who want to purchase firearms in the future because somebody who doesn't want to purchase a firearm didn't pay attention to the video or didn't want to pay attention to the test.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a common sense amendment. First of all, the training course, as we discussed before, is an owner's requirement. However, allowing the component to be taught at home and learned at home, this is not new. There are schools all over the country that do this right now very, very effectively. To answer my good friend Delegate DeMay's objection, you simply put a little test on it to make sure that you understood the information. No big deal. That's what they use everywhere. There's a driving school that you can take in Virginia. You need to take those schools. You go through the program, you take a quick test, you get your certificate. The American Red Cross, I think we'd all say that's the gold standard for learning. I just took a lifeguarding class. I used to teach lifeguarding a long time ago. I had to redo it this year. All the instruction was online. You had good videos, you had good instruction, it was consistent, they knew that I knew the material. I had to take tests. Of course, there was also the practical part, which is in the pool, and that's what we're talking about here. There'll still be a practical part where people will be able to operate the firearm, but this simply says that the part of the course that's instructional will be made available online. I think it's very common sense. It's going to help people who want to get firearms to be able to do so in an efficient and in a manner that makes sure that they get the right instruction. I would think the Delegate DeMay would want that, to make sure that they're not going through things very quickly, but they get just the information that they need and exactly when they get it. So I would move this amendment. I think it's common sense. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a really good amendment, and I'm a new boater. I got a boat a few years ago, and I took a class online to learn how to become a better boater. I'd read a little bit and I'd answer questions, and that really helped me. And I think that this would be a really good amendment so that people wouldn't have to leave their home. They could take the class and they could study right there. Maybe they could take it twice if they wanted to. It's a good amendment, and I just think that we need to look out for people who may not want to get in their car and drive and spend all that gasoline. They can stay right in their house. They're going to have to go through the tolls, pay more money. They can stay home, and they could and take the class right there. This is a really good amendment, and I would just like to ask everybody, please just vote for this. Thank you.
Why does he always sound like a 12-year-old? Good old boy from the country.
With the Vice Chairman and a few other members of the work group, the one thing that I did get out of it by having an instructor there is the opportunity to converse and to ask questions. You wouldn't have that opportunity by a simple video. I had a lot of questions. The other members had a lot of questions. They were able to explain and answer our questions, and I think that that was probably one of the more beneficial aspects of the training, is the opportunity to give and take and to ask questions. Thank you.
I appreciate what the chairman just said regarding this. However, we're not negating that by adopting this in the bill. You're still going to have interaction with a firearms instructor on the range. That's still a component of this training. We're simply saying, look, the classroom portion should be something that everybody gets the same thing. And I mean, you know as well as I do what you're going to have. If you've got more than one instructor, you're going to have more than one type of class. You're still going to have one-on-one time with an instructor at the range. You're still going to be able to ask questions. And quite frankly, if you have to show proficiency with the firearm, is that not going to be revealed to that instructor that you didn't pay attention to what was on the video? So we're not negating the personal contact. We're simply trying to streamline the experience and cover the state's liabilities by providing the same level of training to every individual that seeks it.
I just want to point out that the DC Metro Police just went online for training their officers. So without this amendment, Maryland will require their citizens to have more training to handle a firearm than the DC Metro Police. Tell me how that makes any sense. Thank you.
All right, roll call on
Kelly K.
Yes.
Walt Stryker. Cliffinger. Carter. Yes. Swain. Valentina Smith. No. McComas. Yes. Harris.
Yes.
Glass.
Yes.
Spiegel.
Yes.
Huff.
Yes.
Luster.
Yes.
Mitchell.
No.
Rosenberg.
No.
Yes.
McDermott. Samarama. Aurora. Conway. Anderson. Simmons.
Winograd. Cromwell. Costa. Collison. Donahue.
Yes.
Elliott.
Yes.
Frank.
Yes.
Hubbard. Kent.
Yes.
Kelly. Kinsey.
Yes.
Chris.
Yes.
McDonough. Moorheim.
No.
Murphy.
No.
David Williams.
No.
Oates. Peter Melvin. Reedy.
Yes.
Reddy. Durant.
No.
Turner.
No.
Rose. Yes.
Swain. No.
Sorry. Anderson.
No.
Yes. Well, the amendment failed. Yes, sir. No. Well, that's failed. Okay, the next amendment, yes, sir. Go ahead. Go ahead. Yes.
Well, I want to go back to 2. Unless anybody else has anything on 5.
Opposed to Amendment 5, we haven't adopted it. At what point will you move to adopt the amendment so we may have some discussion on it? Amendment number 5, which is on page 10, line 25, which deals, I just want to make sure that we don't adopt it without discussion, because we have adopted all the other amendments, but we did not adopt Amendment 5. That was my understanding.
I appreciate what the delegate is saying, and because the amendments were spread out over multiple pages.
It is possible that we would miss something that somebody wants to adjust.
I just want to make sure that I understand what.
We have not adopted Amendment number 5. When do you presume to? Well, they've just moved from Amendment 5 to Amendment 2. All right. Okay.
Well, there's only one on 2. So if you want, we can knock that out. That was when we had. I just got the amendment on it, and then we can, I guess, go back to 5. But so on number 2, so this is basically Senator Frosch's bill that got put in here, and it's a technical, I'm sorry. Yeah, the number is 33920. I just gave it to council. And I'll explain what this one does. And so Delegate Mitchell had this bill in the House, and I showed Delegate Mitchell this amendment. He's fine with it. In fact, he was going to offer a similar amendment on the House version. Basically, right now, I think there's universal agreement on what it's trying to do. We want to ban these cop killer bullets, but the problem is, as Delegate Anderson pointed out, that it's too broad right now, the standard that's in the current language, and that it's going to catch up people primarily who are hunting waterfowl and things like that, because they use these, people who are hunting are using these types of non 100% lead bullets. So this amendment here gets at basically what we're trying to get at, which is the cop killer type bullets with a better, tighter definition. And as I said, I talked this about the House sponsor.
Microphone system is such a problem today, but we have run this amendment by the state police, and we have been told that it is not appropriate because it's not in accordance with the federal ban on the what are called the cop killer bullets, and that the language that is in the reprint is substantially similar to the federal ban, which has been on the books since the 1980s. And apparently has worked very well since then. And so that it is the position that we don't think it makes sense to deviate from the federal law. That apparently there is actually, particularly with reference to the part of the proposed amendment that says that it's a projectile designed primarily to penetrate body vest or body shield armor, that there is really no ammunition that is specifically designed to do that, so that is something that we don't think makes sense. So it would be a recommendation that we not accept this amendment and that we leave the language as it is in the reprint, because it is consistent with the language that's currently in the federal ban.
They definitely are. Teflon coated bullets definitely are made to go through vests. So the police officer here says that. And look, if there's a problem with the amendment, they don't like it, then my suggestion would be just to strip 2, and then we have Frosch's bill here. We can fix it and pass it. But the problem is with the language now, it doesn't mirror what the federal government's doing, and it's catching up. Everyone who's looked at this, the NRA, the manufacturers, everybody look at this, said it's going to catch up hunters in this, the way it is currently drafted now. So my suggestion is if you don't like my amendment, then let's just pull 2 and not put it in here and fix Frosch's bill and pass Frosch's bill and fix it. But the problem is that the way it is now, people are using, with the bullets that you have to use to go shoot waterfowl and things like that, you need these certain type of non 100% lead bullets. And in fact, they also told me that if you're shooting all these lead bullets in the bay, you also have an environmental issue as well. So my suggestion is if you don't like my amendment, then to strip 2 and we'll work on it later. But it's clearly catching up hunters in this because this is not properly constructed. And quite frankly, if the federal one already catches it, which this is not mirroring it, we wouldn't have to pass it anyways. But
this is what they think they're banning.
Really? Madam Chair wants this to comply with federal law. Could we just amend the whole bill to comply with federal law?
I would think that if you're using any bullets that have any lead in them, and let's say you're going out duck hunting, and obviously you're going to miss, that's going to go into the pond, and then the ducks usually, depending on how shallow it is, they could get the lead in their system, and then somebody kills the duck, and then they eat some lead, and then there you go. I mean, no? Well, anyway, I think that's a problem.
No, because the ducks eat the lead that makes them sink to the bottom of the pond. Because they can't fly anymore.
Apparently they're working on something like that.
Pass through your system. Lead
Hold this
doesn't work
for
like
5 more minutes. They're all chatting. One of these days they'll get it straight.
They're just making shit up. They're just pulling it out of their ass. Of course, they have been all along.
Delegate Spiegel, you have an amendment?
I'm not sure that all of our amendments were geared towards saying, oh, this will be toward 5 or 2. After we pass these, later can we do the amendments, even though they may affect something that we went over previously, because we've got a stack of amendments and didn't say, well, this one goes to this amendment, because the way the amendments are here, they stretch over several pages. And so we didn't sit down and say, this one's going to go to just 2, this one's going to go to just 5.
Take your amendments and we'll work through them.
Okay, thank you.
Right. Yeah, let's take another amendment, because I think they're still working on the whatever, so.
How about 353327/1? 353327/1. Yes.
What we were doing was we had adopted the committee amendments with the exception of a discrete number of amendments. All right, and I'm going to ask the Madam Chair, because there are a lot of amendments that can be offered, that if we are past the point where anyone is discussing those amendments, that at this point someone move the adoption so we may speak against them or for them should we choose, and then move on to the amendments. What? But, well, eventually they will. Okay, let's hear McDermott on the amendment. We got an amendment.
Go sit in there for a while.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Colleagues, I appreciate your movement on the latitude. Let me ask you to do this one more time. This is another addressing of something that was inadvertently left out of this bill.
I discussed this with the Vice Chair. The Constitution calls for a militia in the state of Maryland. The militia is totally under the control of the governor of this state. The militia is not a part of this bill, and yet it is in our Constitution. In fact, the militia is mentioned in the Second Amendment. I encourage you to adopt this amendment, which would allow the militia of the state of Maryland to also be given the same provisions and thought that you gave to the Armed Forces of the United States, the National Guard for the state of Maryland, and the Defense Force for Maryland, and allow the militia to find themselves in the same standing at the discretion of the governor. I move the amendment.
The public safety article, and it says organized and unorganized militia. it says there are two classes of state militia, the organized militia and the unorganized militia. Organized militia, it consists of the National Guard, the inactive National Guard, which I don't know what that is, if you could help me, and the Maryland Defense Force, which we've already, I gather, covered in the previous amendment. Then it says the unorganized militia. The unorganized militia consists of those individuals described under 13202, but who are not regularly enlisted or commissioned in the organized militia. So tell me this, first, who is a part of the inactive National Guard, and then also tell us about the unorganized militia. Who's part of that?
I would submit to you, whether somebody's in ready reserve status for the National Guard or
within the armed forces, they may, the inactive ready reserve component of the National Guard, people that are active but not drilling, not a part of regular drills, but they're still maintained as a member. I would submit that those folks are included within the definition of organized militia. I would
submit to you that the unorganized militia would be relevant to the governor to establish.
At any time when he wants to call up the state militia, that he can have that discretion. He can determine what that is.
Under 13203, I believe it says that the militia consists of citizens of the state, citizens of the United States who take an allegiance, and then it says of foreign birth who are residents of the state and have declared their intention to become citizens of the state. I mean, I'm still a little foggy on what the unorganized militia is.
It's not any different than it's an expanded
Definition of the National Guard, of the Maryland Defense Force. It's an all-inclusive definition for all these different groups. And one of the things that I have learned so well in this committee from you, Delegate Simmons, is to make sure that you're inclusive in what you put in the bill, and not to be exclusive and arbitrarily leave something out that the governor may need access to, or we may want as citizens to have that capability. Because it is mentioned in the Constitution, I would urge the members to make sure that we cover in this bill, even if the folks that occupy the state militia by definition are or could be members of those other groups. This is also something constitutionally that we should adopt, and I believe that it also falls in line with what many in this room, while maybe not myself, believe that the Second Amendment speaks directly to the militia. And why would you not want to include that? Because to be exclusive based upon your definition of the Second Amendment would seem to negate the whole purpose. So
can I just ask you this? Yeah, I'm just trying to get an answer to the question. I would be inclined to be inclusive if I had an answer to the question, which is the unorganized militia consists of those individuals described under 13202, but who are not regularly enlisted or commissioned in the organized militia. And then it says, the militia consists of able-bodied individuals who are citizens of the state or of foreign birth and who are resident of the state, but who have declared their intention to become citizens of the state. Tell me this: does the unorganized militia ever meet, or is it just kind of chaotic?
We're here!
By definition, they're not something that meets on a regular basis. It is people that the governor can call upon and form and make them inclusive in the organized militia at his discretion.
List of names where he can call upon them. I'm saying, is there something called, we're only trying to understand what this is.
To you that the unorganized militia are the folks that are out there in your neighborhoods that maybe have training, previous military experience, previous law enforcement background, people that just care about their state, that would render aid in time of need, that the governor could then consolidate under the heading of the state militia.
There is no current list of individuals who consist or comprised of the quote-unquote unorganized militia.
Wait, well, I hear what you're saying, but I would submit to you that historically, the unorganized militia is what got this country going in the first place. It was not people that were under the banner of some particular Army or Navy or Air Force, certainly not recognized at that moment in time, but people that band together for the common good. In this case, the common good of the state. the common good to protect the other people that are here. And as to the citizenship issues, those are things that we require of the Army and the National Guard, the military. They're allowed to bring in people that are not necessarily citizens, as long as they show allegiance to the state. I would just submit to you that by definition, because it is in the Constitution, we should be inclusive with it in our language.
Militia and military affairs. So powers of the General Assembly. General Assembly shall make from time to time such provision for organizing, equipping, and disciplining the militia as the exigency may require, and pass such laws to promote voluntary militia organizations as may afford them effectual encouragement. And then, curiously, now that I've heard of a Maryland Defense Force militia, there is a footnote under the Constitution about the Maryland Defense Force, which talks about the governor has the option of adopting a voluntary military program involving the training of soldiers of the Maryland Defense Force, which is the website that I was referring to earlier, as a unit of the organized Maryland militia that is in traffic and crowd control activities to prepare MDDF soldiers should they be called to active duty and be required to perform such comparable activities. And the governor can establish that program under which the MDDF soldiers can volunteer and train without pay. So I think perhaps the last amendment, despite the fact that I voted against it, may well have been proper. But I'm concerned that this one, based on the comments and questions by Delegate Simmons, is way too broad and should be, I would respectfully say, be opposed. And I would ask the body to vote against it. Go back 6, 7 governors, whatever. This is something that we've never had to use in our time.
Just so I can understand what we're doing, we're saying that our Constitution recognizes the need for and should support a militia, and that we're going to say, we're going to put out a bill that says we'll prohibit them from being able to have what their constitutional duty requires them to exist for and be there for. So we're going to prohibit them from being exempt from being able to get the firearm. It makes no sense. If the Constitution recognizes them, the governor has the ability to deal with them, why would we not include them as just being exempt from the requirements that are there, like we are doing with the others that are military? Not the militia. The militia is...
Thank you.
Have the right to establish a state, have the right to establish a state militia. We have done so. We have called it the Maryland Defense Force. That is our state militia. If we as a legislature choose to exercise our state constitutional right to create another force, then at that point in time, and only then do we, when we create that force, do we go through and change the code to where the state militia is relevant, including this piece of the code, and only at that time. But at this point in time, our state militia is the Maryland Defense Force. We've adopted that language. I supported it. This is not necessary. This is simply, frankly, redundant. Thank you.
Yes. No. No. Yes. 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 No. No. Yes. No. No. Pendergrass? No. Cromwell? Yes. Costa? Yes. Coleman? No. Donahue? you, yes. Elliot. Frank. Yes. Mulder. Yes. Yes. A. Kelly. Kimsey. Yes. Fred. Yes. McDonough. Yes. Moorheim. No. Murphy. No. David Pulliam. No. No. Oates. Senior Melvin. No. Reedy. Yes. Resnick. No. Durant. No. Turner. No. Hammond. No. Buster.
The First Amendment is 32322/2. This amendment affects page 12, line 11 of the bill. Amendment number 1 clarifies the purpose paragraph. Sure. All right. The number, once again, is 32322/2.
2 hours, 15 minutes.
/2.
The first two address the inclusion, where we deal with the exceptions to the rule. We deal with the United States Armed Forces, we deal with the Maryland National Guard, but we did not include the members of the Maryland Defense Force. This would include them in every entry where the National Guard or the Armed Forces of the United States are included in the new bill. It would basically be a little bit more inclusive and would capture something that I don't think the governor or the Senate meant to leave out, is the members of the Maryland Defense Force. I can take that first, and then I'll add the second one, which deals with veterans. The amendment has 3 parts. Those are the first 2 parts. Do you want to take those up first and then deal with the third part? That's fine. I tell you, I can do the third part. You may want to separate them for voting purposes. That's the only reason I tell you. If you're going to separate them, then I'll wait. Well, I think you should separate them because I think this is a good amendment, and I think folks may want to support this as an inclusive act, and I would move the amendment. The Maryland Defense Force.
Tried to split them and the militia. That's us.
Kind to just tell me what is the Maryland Defense Force? I'm not too smart.
The Defense Force is something that the governor has at his discretion in emergencies within the state. Their work is a home guard, if you will, on behalf of the National Guard when the National Guard may in fact be deployed or not available. I have seen them deployed for hurricane security and safety and those types of acts. I would think that the governor and we would want to include them in the list of folks that we want to exempt or make part of this requirement going forward.
Just a very quick clarifying question. I don't necessarily have an objection to the amendment, but it is my understanding that in order to be a member of the MDF, you have to be retired in good standing from the National Guard or the existing U.S. Armed Forces, in which case you would already be in the bill. It might be a little redundant. I don't have an objection, but I think it just might be redundant.
I appreciate that. I still think we ought to make this a part of the bill going forward, because the governor could choose to change the requirements and allow people that maybe are involved in other aspects, whether they be law enforcement or something else, to be part of the Maryland Defense Force. I'd hate to see them not included in this type of case. To the delegate,
in order to make that change in terms of requirements, wouldn't we have to make that change in requirement, or the governor could single-handedly make that change?
I think the governor's setting the standard for either it's in Comar, he's setting the standard for who can be a member of the Maryland Defense Force. So I don't think we lose anything by making it a part of this bill. We're going to be more inclusive, and I'm going to ask you to do that with one other body as well that's in the Constitution. But I will move that under these circumstances. Yeah, he could use executive order, Delegate Swain, and that would be something that he could do tomorrow and make it inclusive. So he could expand membership at his discretion.
I don't know anything about the Maryland Defense Force, so I mean I don't know when it is used, or who uses it, or whether it's done by executive order, or whether it's done by Comar. So I mean I don't. If Delegate Resnick is correct and they're already covered, I don't.
Madam Vice Chair, if they're already covered, this is simply clarifying language, and it harms no one.
Covers.
Well, if he doesn't know anything about guns, it doesn't keep us from trying to ban them.
Delegate just informed you, then why would that be an issue just to make it inclusive within the bill? That's all.
Who it covers. I'm assuming he's correct, but if he's not, I don't know who else it covers. I mean, I'm assuming, I'd like to see where it is in the code so that I know who it covers before I... Okay, and that's the reason why I'm asking her to check.
Delegate Resnick.
Shouldn't the Defense Force be able to use guns?
You're asking a question of clarification, because I think that's the case, but I'd like clarification as well.
I don't
Go out and people.
trust that I know of from the numerous people that testified in front of us. And I'm going to assume that the great majority of any type of calling up of this force would authorize the possession of a rifle or a gun. I'm going to ask you to reject the amendment.
You know, the purpose of this body and the reason that we're all here is because nobody owns the total end-all of this bill. It's a 50-page bill. It is possible that somebody left out something unintentionally, and the purpose of us having this time and amendments is to get this right before it moves forward. So if you don't know, and if you've not heard of them, well, I have, and I have seen them in use in this state. And I think it is a big mistake if you don't make it more inclusive about some of these that the governor has access to in times of emergency, and that you be inclusive in this language and not exclusive.
Go ahead, Delegate.
Back up with Delegate said about getting this thing right. All we got to do is look up into New York to see how screwed up their bill is. They rushed to judgment getting this thing through. Now they've got situations where they got police officers carrying 7 rounds in their magazine because the law says that they can only have 7 rounds in their magazines. Their SWAT teams can't have more than 7 rounds in their machine, you know, on their AR-15s. I mean, we've got to get this right, or else we've got to come back just like New York does and come back and fix it in another legislature. So I think we owe the people of Maryland to get this thing right.
Reasonable, well thought out amendments. A policy of no amendments keeps this bill from being a better bill. Keeps this bill from being something that people can say, yes, was well thought out and well debated. But as you can see here, the same policy that's going to be followed on the floor of no amendments being accepted is being done here. And these are reasonable amendments. There's no reason to deny them.
Warheim has actually looked up the Maryland Defense Force website and frequently asked questions. What is the process for joining? Contact the recruiter at recruitermddf.us. You'll be asked to interview with the unit commander. Upon selection, you must complete the application for service. Upon acceptance, you will be sworn in and assigned to your prospective unit. How long is enlistment? It's voluntary, and the soldiers enlist for 2-year renewable periods. You may be involuntarily discharged on an honorable basis at any time with or without cause. You have a right to reassign at any time by giving no less than 30 days notice. More information on terms of membership can be found in the application process or package. Do I have to go to basic training? All members are required to go through basic training classroom curriculum as soon as possible after enlistment. This course covers basic military drill and ceremonies and the history of the Maryland Defense Force. Members with primary military service can have some requirements waived. What rank do I hold? Is prior military experience required? Is preferred but not required? Do I need to be a resident of Maryland? No. Any U.S. citizen is eligible to join regardless of their legal state of residence. I don't know who these people are, and I don't really know that, and we've not heard anything about them in there, and I think the chairman was correct.
Governor's beck and call when he needs them. But you don't know what the qualification. You need to put the National Guard in here. I don't think anybody would debate with me about that. That would look like an oversight. I brought this up because it's an oversight. You messed up. You didn't put this in the bill, and it needs to be in the bill. That's all I'm telling you. You need to put these people in the bill. They're called soldiers for a reason. Put them in the bill.
The bill. On the motion. Take a roll call.
What are we voting on? 1 and 2?
Just the first two amendments on this particular. We bifurcated it.
All right.
1 and 2. All right. Roll call.
Yes.
Yes. Yes, it's just a matter of common sense. It should be in there. Yes.
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 Yes. No. No. Yes.
Bromwell. Yes. Costa. Yes. Collison. Donahue. Yes. Elliott. Yes. Frank. Yes. Hubbard. Catch. Yes. Kelly. Gifty. Yes. Krebs. Yes. McDonough. Moorheim. Yes. Murphy. Williams. Oates. Steve Mountain. Reedy. Yes. President. Yes. Durant. No. Turner. No. Hammond.
All right. The amendment passed. Go ahead.
All right. Hey. Now he's going to put them in with
Says that if you're 18 years old and you're a member of the United States Armed Forces or our National Guard, that you are exempt from the provisions of this bill, that you are allowed to purchase a regulated firearm. Currently, a citizen in Maryland has to be 21 years of age in order to qualify. This recognizes what we've always heard from our military personnel. We send them off to war, but we do not allow them some of the rights that other people, would possess. They're allowed to carry weapons in combat. They come back home and they're denied that very privilege here in Maryland. This would allow that somebody who's at least 18 years old and is a member of the United States Armed Forces or the National Guard to be exempted from that and be allowed to purchase a regulated firearm. I move the amendment.
Roll call on the amendment.
Yeah, we should have every seat filled in there. That shouldn't be empty. Oh, there's anti-gun ladies left.
Yes. Yes.
They all voted yes on this. I don't know if they know what they're doing.
I don't think anyone wanted to do the voting against young person.
It's pretty uncontroversial.
Yes.
Voting yes to sure it can get struck on the House floor. When they're fun. If they're all voting yes on the committee, so that they can strike it on the House floor. I voted for it before I voted after June. 141, over 18.
For a number of
Is amendment number 353327/2. 353327/2.
last one passed.
Just read the Second Amendment. Include that group.
would like to make sure, because it's got to be read in context, and I'm not fast enough on my feet at the moment to do that. I'd like to ask counsel, is counsel there?
Counsel is here.
It's my understanding, as I read it, that if we put this in, it adds these people to the definition of manufacturers, which means they would be governed by the same rules that manufacturers are governed, which presumably means that there would be tighter control of them. I ask this question because I picture my son, who is getting a 3D printer, for instance. I would like to think that he would not be able to manufacture 20 ammunition, 20 round clips in his home. I think that's what this amendment does without getting some kind of a manufacturer's license. I'd like to be clear on whether this makes the bill more stringent to include home manufacture, or I'm misunderstanding the amendment.
President Aurora, thank you.
Sponsor, would the fact that you can manufacture anything that the state has already deemed as forbidden and that you can't have it in the state, would that not negate everything that you're trying to do? If I can't possess a 20-round magazine and you manufacture one, how would that be allowed?
Actually, Delegate Durham, under the bill, of a 20-round magazine would not be forbidden, but I believe it's a sale, use, manufacture, that sort of stuff. Yeah, my concern was whether the definition of manufacture would encompass 3D printing, and the Attorney General's office said it was at least uncertain, but they said it was certainly very I'm still going to say that 3D printing constitutes manufacturing under the definition. I think it's a 3304. I don't have it open in front of me.
First off, I think that this is another bill. I mean, this is a brand new technology. As I read it, and I can't read it in context, but as I read it, I mean, could it end up outlawing some 3D printing of other stuff? Or is it? I mean, I'm just concerned. I think this needs to be a separate bill, a separate hearing. We can't amend on the fly like this, in my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We've got a lot of military bases in this state. We've got law enforcement who are able to still buy this stuff. They have to still buy this stuff. And we're cutting off, the manufacturers can still sell, correct me if I'm wrong, but the manufacturers can still sell to police, to military, those organizations. Well, we're stopping, futuristic, business here with this amendment. They're not going to be able to use this technology to produce these things to possibly sell them to the military or the police department. I agree. This is the wrong time,
Mr. Chairman, if I can correct the gentleman when he's wrong, this does not apply to manufacturers. This would apply to those who do not have dealer's licenses or manufacturer's licenses. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
If there's testimony for it, and we don't have testimony, and we have not heard any testimony on this issue. On the roll call on the amendment. On the amendment.
Wait, there was a question. No second. All right. Apparently there was.
All right. No, a roll call on the amendment then.
No.
State County. Carter. No. Wayne. No. Don Smith. No. No. Garrett. No. Glass. No. Eagle. No. Buster. No. Mitchell. No. Rosenberg. No. McDermott. No. Valderrama. No. Aurora. Yes. Conway. No. Anderson. No. Simmons.
Pendergrass.
No.
Bromwell.
No.
Costa. No. Cullison.
No.
Donahue.
No.
Elliott.
No.
Frank.
No.
Hubbard.
No.
Ketch.
No.
Kelly.
No.
Kipke.
No.
Krebs.
No.
McDonough. McDonough. Moorheim.
Yes.
Murphy. Nathan Pulliam. Oakes.
Yes.
Pena Melnick. Reedy. Resnick. Turner.
Thank you for bringing us together on this very
Mr. Chairman, may I proceed to my second? Okay, let me proceed to my second. Mr. Chairman, I'll proceed to my second one, if that's all right.
Yeah, you want to present another amendment?
All right. Hopefully this one won't be as uniting. This amendment is 783222/3. Mr. Chairman, can I read my third amendment as well? We'll do things pass them out together. The other one's very short. Does that make sense to you? I have a third amendment as well. Can I ask the staff to pass that out at the same time? Okay, you bet. All right, looks like they're almost all passed out, so with the chair's permission, I'll proceed. All right, this amendment requires the Department of Public Safety and Correctional Service to adopt by October 2014 regulations authorizing licensed firearm dealers and private providers of fingerprint services to take and submit fingerprints to CJIS, the Central Repository, essentially to require them to establish protocols for the gathering, processing, and sending of fingerprints. This amendment would facilitate the application process for handgun qualification licenses by allowing those licensed firearm dealers and certain other companies to take and submit fingerprints to the Central Repository.
I'm stupid, broke it again.
Under DCPS's specifications. I just have concerns about the administrative burdens that this bill create that they need to be met so that this law can be executed and do what it intends to do efficiently. As you probably heard, there's a backlog now for mere background checks to purchase a handgun in Maryland. I read one report that said it's an estimated 6-month wait. One thing we can do to help with the new licensing requirement move ahead smoothly would be to make sure there's not a bottleneck in the process of fingerprinting at that stage. And if you've ever had to go get your fingerprints taken at a police station, it's not typically a very quick idea. This idea that I have in front of you now are asking the department to regulate is not a terribly new one. The vice chair was kind enough to provide me with information I believe that the work group received, a list of facilities in Maryland that already provide this sort of service. Many of them were private companies, so requiring the department to adopt regulation for the taking and transmission of these fingerprints, which just helps set standards so interesting companies can partner with the state to make this work. All right, with that, I will move the amendment.
Chairman, actually, there's a lot of reasons why we have set it up so that A, the state police will do it, plus there are, in fact, other private companies that do it, and Delegate O'Rourke is correct that I've given him a list that have been provided to us during the work group process, which I have in the notebook, which I will pull out at some point. But more importantly, apparently the Maryland Dealers Association became aware of this possible amendment, and earlier this afternoon I was provided a note from Frank Boston, who is the lobbyist that handles the Dealers Association, who's indicated that he understands that this amendment was going to be offered, and has indicated that the gun shops do not want to do this because they are not in the business to be taking fingerprints, and that they would rather not have this amendment pass. Happy to share the note.
On the amendment.
Yes.
On the amendment.
Delegate Kelly had a question.
Well,
I just want to get a point of clarification to the boss. I did speak to him, to be brought up to me, and he indicated that as long as it was not mandatory on the gun shops, and they had the opportunity to participate in this, that would be acceptable. So can we get clarification on that before we go any further from Mr. Boston?
Anybody could apply the fingerprint analysis like the rest of the shops that we already have. So there's no need to put this in the code. If you want to become a fingerprint analysis or take fingerprints for the state or anybody else, you go through the same regulations that anybody else did, that the private companies that already did. So I recommend against the motion. Go ahead.
Now, however, in the work group, we discussed this idea of having the dealers do it. It was emphatically stated that we did not want the dealers to be doing it. So evidently, if the law will pass as it is, or proposed, evidently there's something there that precludes them from. So
I would just say two things to that. The first is that as to the fingerprint and the licensing, the experts who came to the work group and testified did indicate that the law enforcement interface is a key component. As we know from the studies from the ATF, in every state where they went with a bogus identification to a dealer, they were able to purchase a firearm with a fake identification at a dealer. So the law enforcement interface is crucial. Let me just finish, Delegate. And in terms of what the chairman said, he's absolutely correct that there is the ability of the state or Department of Public Safety to license private providers, which could include a dealer. Should they apply, should they wish to do it, and should they go through the certification process and be allowed. So I think it is both unnecessary and perhaps against the public policy.
My understanding is, I don't know where it is in the bill that they're allowed. It looks like right now you have to go to state police. And I talked to my local gun store, and I'll tell you why I think this is a good amendment. If you go down to the Frederick County State Police Barracks and go to get fingerprinted, you're going to wait in the line a long time because you got teachers in line, you got nurses in line, everyone else who's already required to be fingerprinted by the state is already in line and doing this. They already are stretched to the limit trying to fingerprint everybody who's currently required by law. And now we're throwing in all the people that want to buy guns, got to get behind them in line. You're creating a huge problem with state police. So all this is saying that, and the delegate from Montgomery County can let me know if I have this correct, is that the gun stores could then set up a state-certified and licensed booth and do it right then and there, do the same thing, send your fingerprints down, do the same instant check as the state police. But the only difference is the state police, who are stretching thin on this bill and who already are having major problems with fingerprinting people, they could do it at a gun center, make it easier.
This is supposed to be, so we cut down on what's called straw purchases. That's supposed to be the problem that this is taken care of. The problem is there is no problem. When we ask about straw purchases, there's less than, 10 in Maryland? They were in the city, they were gang members. They're not straw purchase problem. We went to a law a few years ago that you get one gun per month, unless you have a collector status. And then you can get more than one gun per month. But why are we putting this additional burden on? And as the attorney indicated, the reason that we're doing this is so that you have the interface with the state police. Law-abiding citizens who simply want to exercise a constitutional right will be forced, let me finish please, to go to a state policeman and interface with them in order to exercise that constitutional right. That is an inhibiting factor on the exercise of that constitutional right. It makes no sense to force the person to go before the state police when you can go into the gun shop, put down the fingerprint if what you really want to do is just to check them out and collect the fingerprint there so that they can then purchase their firearm. There is no, Mr. Chairman, I would like to be able to speak. Mr. Chairman, I would like to be able to speak to the issue. Oh no, I don't need a Second or First Amendment right, apparently.
Sir, may I just ask Stacy a question, please? Stacy. No, I need a clarification with what she said. Long and short, we can ask the governor's office that, and they can provide us documentation. And I'm talking about the two western counties, Allegheny here. Evidently, there's 3 machines in the county. There's one at the Cumberland Barracks, which apparently broke half the time. There's one at the McHenry Barracks, and neither one of them can they do anything other than criminal prints on. That means Scottish Investigations operated by a former state trooper. Okay? So in my 2 counties, St. Garrett, which is the biggest, take your hand back now, it's the biggest county in the state of Maryland. They're going to have 3 locations to go to, one of which is a private individual who will probably get most of the work. And I guess my concern is when they show up at the barracks, they're going to be waiting in line for a couple hours because this is going to be very key prioritized, which might be the whole reason we're doing this. Yes. No. No.
Yes.
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 Yes. Yes. Yes. No. No. Yes. Pendergrass. No. Bromwell. Yes. Costa. Yes. Collison. No. Donahue. Yes. Elliott. Yes. Frank. Yes. Hubbard. No. Cash. Yes. A. Miller.
No. Oates. William Melvin. No. Reed. Resnick. No. Moran. No. Turner. No. Evan. No.
The number is 963-229/1. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I feel the momentum going into this one. All right, Mr. Chairman, this amendment addresses concerns raised earlier by Delegate Anderson and Delegate McComas. It would require the disapprovals of a dealer's license or handgun qualification license merely state the reason the application was denied. This is to make sure the applicant is aware of the reasons for denial, especially since the work group took such pains to create these appeal rights. With that, I move the amendment.
So does this mean the workers at the gun store have access to the reason why? How are they going to seal that? How are they going to mail it straight?
Down or for concealed carry permit.
Yeah.
Delegate Aurora did say when I was doing my questions after having read the bill that he did have an amendment that addressed one of the concerns that I had. And the reason why I had that concern is that if we in fact give folks the right to appeal a decision of the board denying them the ability to get this license, they ought to know why they were denied. I mean, how do you appeal something if you don't know what the reason was for you not getting it? I mean, it could have been something in your criminal background that may have been a mistake. It could have been something with regard to your citizenship status that may have been a mistake. So if you don't know what it is they found wrong, then you really can't appeal it. You can't address the issue in a fashion that would perhaps cause you to be successful later. So I'm going to vote for this amendment simply because I just think it's common sense. You give a person a right, then you should also give them a reason for having the right. Oh.
Are you finished? I had Amendment 5609C3, which is 763328/3. All right, it's Amendment 7633328/3, and it adds 5609C3 to the Courts and Judicial Proceedings article on mental health reporting. Yeah, were they handed out? Or, I'm sorry. Oh, okay. Yeah, it was back there somewhere.
What did they do with the one on giving reasons? Did they not decide? No vote on it.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very
We have an amendment. God, it's become chaos. Just in time. I don't know if anybody else has. All right, Mr. Chairman. All right, ladies and gentlemen of the committee, I'm just going to ask your indulgence for a moment. I'm hoping that you have received 763328/3, which is a change of pace. We're going to mental health providers and the failure under current Maryland law to require a mental health care provider to report a imminent serious physical threat by a patient to inflict imminent serious physical injury on a victim to the police. Let me ask you, because I think this is important. The more we fail to deny access to firearms to individuals who should not have access to them, the more we run the risk of having catastrophes, which then creates a public swell in favor of taking people's guns away. Now, I want to begin, and this is important, and to be very short. We had a task force about a year ago, Delegate Rosenberg and I, and with the leadership of the chairman and the House Judiciary Committee, established a task force to study access of individuals with mental illness to regulated firearms. We did this, and when the report came out in December of 2012, it came out just after the horrible incident in Connecticut. Let me read you the recommendation. And stick with me just for 2 minutes. It's important. We might save somebody's life. Finding number 2. The strongest visible indicator that an individual may pose a risk to public safety is the act of making specific threats against themselves or other individuals. Such threatening behavior is a precursor to violence and provides a way to identify people, including those with serious mental illness, who are at immediate risk of committing violence. However, and here's the key, state law does not currently mandate reporting of these incidents. So a recommendation was made by our task force, and the recommendation is all verbal or physical actions threatening suicide or serious violence toward a reasonably identifiable vehicle, or rather victim or victims, should be reported to local law enforcement. Mandated reporting should apply to psychiatrists, psychologists, physicians, social workers, addiction treatment counselors, educators, case managers, and probation agents. Now, the governor has walked away from this recommendation. He did not make it part of his bill. But I want to stress to you that after our task force issued its report, the state of New York and Governor Cuomo, interestingly enough and ironically enough, adopted this recommendation in the New York law that was passed, and specifically pointed to the Maryland task force, which the governor, for some reason, has not embraced. Now, I want to point out something to you under current Maryland law. Under current Maryland law, and this is right in the Courts and Judicial Proceedings article, there is an immunity for mental health care providers under the following circumstances. If a patient indicates to the mental health care provider or administrator by speech, conduct, or writing of the patient's intention to inflict imminent physical injury upon a specified victim or group of victims, the mental health provider has three options. The first is that you can seek civil commitment, which may or may not work if the person leaves the office. The second, if you can believe it, is to say, I'm going to formulate a diagnostic impression and teach the person, and rather treat the person who just said that I'm going to go home and kill my wife of 41 years because I think she's going out with another person. And the third, which is not mandatory, is as follows: to inform the appropriate law enforcement agency and, if feasible, the specified victim or victims of the nature of the threat, the identity of the patient making the threat, and the identity of the specified victim or victims. So currently in Maryland law, it is an option of the mental health care provider to report this threat. They don't have to, though. And I suggest to you, now what this bill does is simply to take the very same language that is currently in the law and to say that if a mental health care provider or administrator knows of a patient's propensity for violence, this comes from the current statute, and the patient indicates to the mental health care provider or administrator by speech, conduct, or writing of the patient's intention to inflict imminent, serious physical injury on a specified victim or group of victims, then the health care provider shall inform appropriate law enforcement of the nature of the threat, the specified victim or victims, and the identity of the specified victims. Now, making this mandatory is simply taking current law, which is optional, and requiring them to do it when it is a imminent, again, I want to stress, when the patient expresses not a theory of doing this, but a present intention to inflict imminent, serious physical injury. The healthcare providers, the psychiatrists and the psychologists, predictably are opposed to it. Hang on, just give me one more second before you vote. They don't like it because they say it intrudes on their prerogatives. It intrudes on their prerogatives. In other words, under the law, they have three options if this happens. They don't have to do it. So what I'm suggesting to you is that we're living in a changed environment. Just like all of my Second Amendment friends who are sitting here and asking, why do we have to have changes in the law? Well, unfortunately, there are some changes in the law that are occurring because of the changed environment we live in. But the psychiatrists and the psychologists want to pretend as if there is no change in our environment, and they want to continue to live with the old law. I suggest to you that, on balance, public policy and public safety is served by making what is currently an optional reporting requirement under 5609 a mandatory one, and that is all this amendment does, and I move the amendment.
Yeah, I'd like to respond to that and ask the committees to resist the amendment. I sat down with the maker of the amendment just the other day with mental health advocates, and conclusion, we were unable to reach any sort of consensus. At the end of the meeting, I asked the group that we met with, perhaps they could suggest language which could address the delegates' concern for increasing public safety without hindering the treatment of patients. They did get back to us. I did share the response with the maker of the amendments. The groups that got together to discuss this, and I just want to share this with you, because it wasn't just a willy-nilly group of providers. The group that signed off on the letter is the Maryland Psychiatric Society, the Suburban Maryland Psychiatric Society, the Mental Health Association of Maryland, and the Maryland Disability Law Center. And what they say, that after much internal discussion, all the organizations mentioned above, which I just mentioned, have strongly opposed the delegates' proposed amendment and are unable to suggest language that would change Maryland's current law without jeopardizing both public safety and undermining the effective treatment of patients. They believe, and they say this in their letter, that requiring a mandatory report to police would deter otherwise voluntary patients from seeking needed treatment without increasing public safety. Again, this is an option. We should allow the providers that see these patients day in and day out to make that determination. Under current law, they can do that. The delegate is absolutely correct. They have that option. They can continue to treat, develop a treatment plan that would be effective for that individual, or they can civilly commit. They could go through that process as well. Those are the three options. But I think we should leave that to the hands of those who see these patients, again, day in and day out basis, and I urge you to resist the amendment.
He indicates to his mental health provider, I'm going to kill someone. And he gives every indication that it's going to be imminent. I'm going to go home. I'm going to go to that school with my shotgun. Then that person, that provider should not be picking up the phone and calling law enforcement?
That is certainly an option.
That's an option.
That's not in every case. Not in every case. It's hard to really interpret what a person is going to or is not going to do. And that should really be left up to the judgment of that mental health provider. Not in all cases. You're treating a young person. So I'm going to go home and shoot my parents. Not in all cases does that young person follow up on that threat.
What happens if he does? What happens if he goes to that school?
Well, again, under current law, they have that option to report. And with the amendment that the good delegate from Montgomery County has put forth, says they just have to report to law enforcement. It doesn't say anything about what law enforcement has to do, that they simply have to report. I would suggest in those serious cases, in those very serious cases, they're going to go file for civil commitment. That's what I would suggest. And that's what we heard from the meeting the other day, that in those very serious cases, they would move forward with a civil commitment proceeding.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, what you were just saying is, what's already in code is that health provider can also call parents and say, look, they're coming home to kill you guys, and then make sure you guys, what happens if they're not home? So the bottom line is, this area right now is keeping your old phone right there, call 911.
If someone goes to their mental health provider and says they're going to call Captain Kelly, I want someone to call the police, and I want someone to call Captain Kelly. But I want to call the police first. I know.
Is important, and I want you to remember that our own task force on mental health, on access to mental health, individuals with mental illness to regulated firearms made this one of their principal recommendations. We empowered a task force to study it. They came back and said that the strongest visible indicator that an individual may pose a risk to public safety is the act of making specific threats. Now, I would ask you to remember that this is not something that is being pulled ex nihilo out of the air. It's the recommendation of a task force that we asked to look into it. The second thing I'd like to stress to you is that, look, we should not be here as advocates for any special interest group. We should not be here as advocates because one group says you're interfering with my prerogatives. I think we should be advocates for public safety. And I think that frankly, those who are opposed to it really bear the onus of saying, why is the task force report recommendation erroneous? I go back and I say that all this bill does is say that what is now optional must be mandatory. And I have spoken with a number of mental health care providers. And frankly, there is no real consensus. It varies from whether you're dealing with a psychologist, a psychiatrist, a clinical social worker, as to what they think they would do under the circumstances. If somebody says, they made a threat on your life, and then the psychiatrist or the social worker says, I think I'm going to try to civilly commit this guy, and the guy walks out, And the guy says, well, you know, I've done my best. There is nothing, there is no obligation under the law to call the law enforcement. And with regard to something that, and finally, that the chairman said, look, if you call law enforcement as a professional and you report that my patient threatened to kill Barack Obama, okay, I'm sure, by the way, if somebody came in and said that they were threatening to kill the governor of the state, there's no question that a call would be made. But how many other times are threats made? And people basically decide, I don't know, maybe he was serious, maybe he wasn't serious. What I'm suggesting is public policy demands that we not allow a handful of people to play God.
It's like mandating that your report of judgment calls ridiculous. How do you enforce that? You haven't reported it. Oh, I didn't think it was a problem. Didn't you say in front of me? Someone, I probably wasn't paying attention at that time. Proof that it. But I don't think it's passive. It'll just make the small even more fun. Oh, that's true. Did you see McDermott trying to get the whole thing screwed with the big people and well, the militia, I don't know what this means. Yeah, don't worry about that part.
That's not true.
Every year you're telling me when you first did the thing with the military and the national guard, especially when you mentioned the Constitution thing earlier. He led over guy he led into it really well this other thing. Because up until that point, there was some talk, and it was like, oh crap, it's full lines, so they can just send it through. And then all of a sudden, I guess they're on my mouth floor.
Go ahead. I'd like to be a part of this. I came here for
reserve the seat. I'd like to be a part. I reserve the seat. Thank you. I think the amendment is good. What we do know in the past is that some of the persons, young people who had mental health problems, were being seen by a therapist or a psychologist. That psychologist knew that they were going to go out and commit a violent act. They did not report them, and it resulted in the deaths of many people that led us to be here today with some of these heinous incidents where people with mental health problems should not have had the firearms. So I think the gentleman has a good amendment. I, as a libertarian, am concerned about giving people requirements that they mandate, because I don't want them to go forward on everything. But as it's been brought up, you can do other things, such as commit them or get them to help. But if somebody says, I'm going out and I'm going to go into a school and kill a bunch of people, they should have an obligation to report if they have that knowledge. I think it's a good amendment, and I support the gentleman.
It's been a long time since I had torts, but I remember the Tarasoff case in California where they established a duty to warn. My question is that in Maryland so that if a psychiatrist, psychologist, or whoever has a duty to warn the victim, and particularly they can be held liable if something bad happens and they didn't warn. Is that the law of Maryland now?
Everybody to vote on what the bill says, not what it's being characterized. Under 5609 of the Courts and Judicial Proceedings article, there is immunity. This is the immunity section of the law. And the mental health care provider has immunity if the mental health care provider does one of three things. So all we're saying here is, and we're not saying you can't treat somebody, we're not saying you can't seek civil commitment, they're not mutually exclusive, but we would be saying that you must inform the appropriate law enforcement agency. Now, if you fail to do that, you might not have immunity. So what we did was to amend the current law even further to say, because the current law says that all you have to have is the patient indicate that there is a present intention to inflict imminent physical injury. I've amended it to say a present intention to inflict serious physical injury. How much more can you get? When we met with the psychologists and the psychiatrists, they never came back with any proposed language. This isn't a case that they came back and suggested something and I rejected it. I would have been happy to have looked at it. They have never suggested anything, and yet all I'm doing is taking what is the existing Maryland law and saying it is not simply discretionary. Under these circumstances, it's mandatory. This is a tragedy waiting to occur.
Go ahead.
Delegate Simmons is correct. New York did adopt language, and what we're hearing now is they're sorry they did that. The VA up in New York, just an article a couple of weeks ago, basically say we are not complying with the provisions within the law because they are fearful that people will not seek treatment as a result of that. And they have just basically flat out, the VA up in New York said, we're not going to follow this part of the law.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman. Wait a minute, Geraldine Smith, go ahead. Go ahead.
All right, so recognizing, this is to the proposer of the amendment, that we have on the table what are a breach of confidentiality, a concern about chilling the ability for people to go see a physician, and the requirement to do it now or face disciplinary action. But your amendment seems to take away the option to do a treatment plan. Because if you go ahead and tell law enforcement and you go ahead and tell the victims, you're assuming that there's not a treatment plan that can be put into place, because then obviously it'll be violated and there'll be probably no working room left between the patient and the physician for the treatment plan.
Well, let's say two things here. First, the Chairman Hammond made reference to New York. New York did not adopt what I'm proposing. New York adopted not even very similar, it was a very, very broad, and I would agree, problematic law that is problematic. What this is very, very conservative, taken from our own statute. The New York law didn't require even that there be an expression from the patient. It imposed on the healthcare provider an obligation if the healthcare provider reasonably should have known. This is not what this does. I mean, so the New York law is problematic, I would agree, but that's not what this is. Secondly, right now, with regard to the chilling, the quote-unquote chilling effect, anybody that goes into a psychiatrist currently under the law and makes a threat against someone, under the law, the psychiatrist could report them. So you could say that could have a chilling effect. Under the law, the psychiatrist could civilly commit them. So this business about the chilling effect is a red herring. If there's a chilling effect, it's already there because obviously the psychiatrist could do it. What I'm suggesting is that as a matter of balancing, let's talk about this for a moment, balancing the needs of the psychiatrist and the patient with public safety. When someone comes in and makes a serious, imminent threat to commit serious injury, do you really want to be the one that tells the children, the parents at the school, you know, we didn't have a law that required this. This guy went in and told the mental health care professional he was going to go home and get his gun and go to the school, but the mental health professional, in his or her wisdom, didn't take it seriously. What I'm saying is that if somebody makes an intention to inflict serious, imminent physical injury, that should not be their call. They should be required to report it. Now that's a public, that's a public policy judgment, but I ask you to think carefully. We're not talking about a fist fight.
All right. Yeah. Delegate, finish. Delegate. Delegate, go ahead.
I just have a question in response to the amendment. It's an enticing amendment to want to vote for because obviously I understand why we put forth the amendment. My question is, what do you define as the threat? A threat of serious bodily harm. What if a psychologist is meeting with a young man, 14 years old, and he gets picked on at school and he says, you know what, tomorrow I'm going in there and I'm going to beat up these bullies that are giving me a hard time. Is that a credible threat?
The answer is that there's nothing in this bill that takes away from the healthcare provider the right to make those determinations. There's nothing in it. It simply says that if you make, I mean, hear me out here. I'm using the exact same law, not changing a word. So right now, the ultimate decision as to whether the patient has by speech, conduct, or writing expressed a present intention to inflict serious imminent physical injury upon a specified victim or group, that is still the call that the psychiatrist has to make. But if in fact the psychiatrist says that's what the guy has said, he doesn't have the option, as he does under the current law, not to report. You understand what I'm saying?
I understand. I feel like it's a little bit of a distinction, maybe not without a difference, but...
Well, I don't think this should boil down to Judiciary Committee versus... I think that... No, but I think the question should be public safety.
You got up and walked from your chair, and then you popped up here. I was like, what?
Either the full committee, HGO, in a public hearing, or the work group meet with representatives of the task force to hear from those individuals or a representative as to why they had proposed the language that has been rejected and that this amendment would further.
I would defer to the chairman. I did contact the task force, and I was told that no one has contacted them about the bill. Asked to meet with them, and that no one. Remember that the task force had Captain Jack McCauley of the State Police, who we have all worked with regard, as well as the other co-chairman Patrick Dooley. My understanding is they were never asked, never spoken with, and the chairman perhaps can correct me.
Mr. Dooley had worked for me. He's now Chief of Staff for the Secretary. He had indicated that the advocates were a little late to the party in terms of the recommendation. I don't know why they didn't speak up when the recommendation was made, but they have certainly has spoken up since then.
A story picture for Don Blair.
The folks, yeah, that's correct.
All right, the motion is to adopt the amendment. Roll call.
Dume? Lee? Kelly?
Yes.
Wallstriker? Clippinger? Carter? Swain?
No.
Valentino Smith? No. McComas?
Yes.
Parrott?
Yes.
Glass?
Yes.
Smeagol?
Yes.
Huff?
Yes.
Cluster?
Yes.
Mitchell?
No.
Rosenberg?
Yes.
McDermott?
Yes.
Valderrama? Agora?
Yes.
Conway? Anderson?
Conway's an idiot.
Simmons?
Pendergrass.
No.
Bromwell. No. Costa. No. Collison.
No.
Donahue.
Yes.
Elliott. No. Frank. Yes. Hubbard. No. Ketch.
Yes.
Kelly.
No.
Kipke.
No.
Krebs.
No.
McDonough. Moorheim. No. Murphy. Nathan Foley.
No.
No. Oaks. William Melvin.
No.
Reed. Redmond. No. Durant. No. Turner.
No.
I think he should. I know it's friendly now. They're going to take it.
All right. We're going to go back to Delegate Huff's amendment, which was to amendment number 2, right? Amendment number. Yeah, he should.
Hopefully Smeagol's checking Facebook.
Okay.
Hopefully Smeagol's checking Facebook.
All right, Delegate Huff, if you wouldn't mind withdrawing the amendment that you had offered previously.
Yes,
Okay, and then offering the amendment that we are passing out at this point, and with your permission, we will accept this amendment as a friendly amendment, and simply accept this language in lieu of the language that's in the reprint at the moment, because it's been agreed.
2-1. Without objection, this amendment adopted to replace what is in House Bill 281 reprint. Does anybody object to that? Raise your hand. Okay, that amendment is adopted. Who's next? Yes, Delegate Schmidt. Delegate Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Armor-piercing bullet.
You got an amendment? Go ahead. What? Your microphone on?
It was on. I don't think it'll probably work the rest of the day, but no, I'm waiting. It's not on. The amendment anyway is
3027/1. 3027/1. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, on page 20, line 26, on Amendment 5, what this amendment would do is include or exclude from that the firearms that are considered to be antique, curio, or relic firearms. And they're defined under federal law, and I believe, somebody here I'm sure will correct me, I believe it's before 1898. 1898? Okay, thank you. It's before 1898. What the bill currently says is a dealer or any other person may not sell, rent, or transfer a handgun to a purchaser, leasee, or transferee unless they present the dealer a valid handgun qualification license. Well, these antique firearms before 1898 under federal law are exempt from those kind of exemptions. I have spoken to the attorney for the governor's office. They're in agreement. If you have any questions, I'm sure she'd speak to this, but it was just an oversight and not excluding those antique firearms.
Take it apart and refinish the stock, whatever. Turned out okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Is that one of those nice and the banana tip too.
It used to be BATF, and now it's something, and now it's alcohol factual firearms and explosives, I think now. We're showing our age.
And basically, be so much the reading of the amendment. I just gave it 133925/1. Basically, what it does on page 8, line 11, after include, you insert in parentheses Roman numeral 1, and then in line 12 after pistol you insert or, and then Roman numeral 2, an antique, curio, or relic firearm as defined in federal law or in determinations published by the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. So it goes on page 8, line 12. Move the amendment. It's been moved and seconded, Mr. Chair.
From Freedom of Information Act got his application for it. So, to see what good and substantial counted as back then. It was funny.
Basically, it just excludes, copycat weapon does not include an assault long gun or an assault pistol, or, and this adds the antique, curio, relic firearm as defined by federal law or in determinations published by the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. It's a clarifying amendment. It just weapon would not include what's listed there. Makes sense. Sure. Alright, so if we can hold this for just a second, I think it's fine, but if we can let the firearm expert look at it, that'd be great. So if we can pass it for a minute and then we'll come back. Alright, next amendment, who's got one? Delegate Parrott?
Delegate Parrott. Delegate Parrott.
There we go. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have 4 amendments here. The first one let's talk about is 193723/1. Move the amendment. All right. I think everybody has a copy of the amendment. Basically on page 7, there are a couple changes. It just clarifies that an assault weapon does not include a firearm that's designed to use rimfire ammunition. Rimfire ammunition is the kind where the pin hits on the side instead of the center, and really this only applies to like a .22 caliber type of gun. Really low power, it's not as accurate, and in the past this has been accidentally called an assault weapon just because of how it looked, but it's certainly not an assault weapon. We're talking a low-powered ammunition. I'd like to have this considered as a friendly amendment.
guess, do you want to hold on that one then?
We could, we'll hold it for a second, yeah. Is your microphone on, Dick?
Can we turn, all right, thank you. The next amendment is 483325/1. I'd like to move the amendment. I guess we'll pass that out. It's 483325/1. I guess I'll wait for that to get out also.
Apparently, Congress is using for getting potential as elected officials.
Great. Thank you.
Our own organization and
it's 483325/1.
We can start threatening each other's lives.
Correct. Basically, instead of semi-automatic, just clarify it's similar to the last amendment that it would be center fire pistol. So we're talking again. It's not going to apply to the rimfire type ammunition. So this just helps clarify that.
On the reprint, we've stricken that entire section. So, right.
Yes, that's fine. Great. Very good.
McComas's. Delegate McComas, I did ask our firearm experts, and where you would like to put that in, the term curio or relic, the problem is you want to exclude it from being in a